What's up YouTube, Dale here from Zephyr, and today I'm bringing an update to one of my favourite decks that can do incredibly well this format and be built on a slightly tidy budget, and that is of course Scareclaw. So part of the Kashtira, Scareclaw, Terraelement lore, Scareclaw is actually a really good powerful deck that can be built relatively budget, and you can either play it with or without the adventure engine. Now this one is actually without the adventure engine just because of the format we're in. I feel that the adventure engine, as good as it is, isn't really enough to allow you to play through as many hand traps, and in its place I've decided to go with Crossout while also being able to main deck quite a lot of hand traps to help you interact. Now its ideal win con is of course going to be utilising Tryhard, as it does force all of your opponent's monsters and yours to defense while also being able to gain additional attacks as well as gain additional attack stats and being able to do piercing damage depending on the Scareclaws that are pointing to it or that it points to. So with all of that out of the way, please smash that like button, hit that notification bell and subscribe so you don't miss out on any more upcoming content. I'm going to take you through the profile, we'll talk about the budget as we go through it, and I'll also explain exactly what we've got and why I've decided to go with it. Now this isn't the fully budget build as I am playing SP Little Knight, but you can very easily sub that out now for an Appaloosa or an access code, or even go for a Nightmare Unicorn if you wish to. I'll talk about all of the other budget alternatives to the expensive cards in this deck when we get to them. So for the Scareclaw cards, we are going to be starting off with triple right cart. I actually really love the artwork on this, and I generally really like the Scareclaw deck itself. I've played 40 card version, 60 card version, with and without adventure, and I do think it is very, very fun. The biggest issue with the deck is it does search an awful lot, so it can get hurt by Droll, which is another one of them places where I quite like the idea of being able to play Crossout and main deck and Droll if I really fear it in the main, and being able to kind of counteract that, as well as being able to counteract Nibiru right now, because we also lost Baron de Fleur, and I feel that's again where Crossout will give you a bit of an additional edge in comparison to the adventure engine. So carrying on with this one as well, I decided to play 3 of the Acro. You can play 2 if you want to, but of all of them that I was kind of looking at to which one I wanted to bump up, I went with Acro purely just to make Scareclaw Tryhard just stronger. I felt that I have the ability to search out the more attacks or multiple attacks in the form of the Astra and the piercing damage in the form of the Belong, and I felt that Acro just gave me that bit more of a benefit for going first as well as going second, whereas the additional attacks and the piercing damage are only helpful for me going second, whereas hard opening up an Acro is not the end of the world because it means that you can search out another one of your pieces as you go further forward. That being said, another card that you can swap out for an Acro is of course going to be Twin Blade. Now I wasn't actually, Twin Saw. I'm not actually main decking the Twin Saw, that's more of a side deck card, but again that's a place that could take up with the third Acro, or of course if you wanted to, it could also take up the place of the second Arrival as a bit of a preview. We're also playing triple Kashtira Fenrir. Now I know that this can be a bit of a budget crunch for a couple of people, so alternatively to this, that's of course where you would go, okay, we take out the Fenrir, that's your Twin Saw. You can then also play 2 of the Scareclaw Kashtiras, because the idea behind Fenrir is to search out the Scareclaw Kashtira, and you could, if you wanted to, play the 1 planet Rice-Off, and the reason you would do that is because your Rice-Off could then also help you search out your Scareclaw, which pretty much does the same job of what Fenrir does, just doesn't have the additional body or the additional interaction that Fenrir has. Then of course we've got the one Visa Starfrost. This is obviously massively useful in this deck, being able to revive it back from the graveyard, help you get into your fusion monster, as well as being able to be the tuner that you're going to need in order to make your Synchro level 10s. Then for the spell cards, we do have 2 of the Reichphobia. I'm actually waiting to pick up my second copy of the Quarter Century, and then I'll bump both of these up. But I still feel the Prismatic Secret does look absolutely amazing for the deck anyway, and it kind of matches the rest. The only thing that I'm missing right now, or really hoping we get, is foil upgrades for the Acro, the Astra, and the Belong, because then it'll be really, really cool. And then of course we've got 2 of the Arrival. I actually really do like the Arrival. So this one, you target a Scareclaw monster or a Visa Starfrost in your graveyard, special summon it in defense. And if a Scareclaw link monster or monsters you control would be destroyed by battle or card effect, you get to banish this from the graveyard instead. You can only use this effect, which is the protection effect, once per turn, but you can use the revival effect as many times as you have copies, which is why hard opening this is not the end of the world, because again, when you're searching out a Scareclaw card, whatever one you open, it just allows you to search out one of your other Scareclaws that can either be forms of extenders in the Acros, the Belongs, and the Astras, or of course can be revivals in the Arrival. Then of course you do consider the Twin Saw, which is one thing that I'm highly considering main decking rather than siding, and you can also play the Counter Trap as well, which is Clash, which is just as, the Continuous Trap, which is Clash, which is just as good. Then for the hand traps, and obviously the hand traps are going to be accompanied by the Crossout, but we've gone with triple Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, alongside double Nibiru, double Ghost Ogre, And of course, triple imperm, as these are the most commonly used hand traps in the deck right now or in the format. And with Nibiru, it probably is more of a side deck card, but it's just one of them ones that even if you go second, hard opening it, sometimes a lot of decks don't expect it to be in the main deck, so they do get a little bit less cautious with it, and they start to get a little bit lazy and then run into it, and they're like, oh damn, this being mained. On top of that as well, it also gives you that ability that should your opponent be main decking Nibiru, you can have the main deck to out it in the form of cross out as well. So this is the reason I went with the hand trap lineup, was because naturally I'm already going to be playing stuff like the imperms, like the ashes, and like the ogres, and all I'm really doing with the cross out when you're considering the adventure package is anywhere from 8 to 9 cards. You could very easily then consider you've got your 3 crossouts, you've got your 2 Nibirus, and then it gives you a bit more free space to main deck stuff like talents, droplets, and prosperities, which can also be crossout targets against your opponent. So if you set a crossout because they haven't hand trapped you and they're activating prosperity to try and dig to a starter, rather than you using an ash blossom on it, you can use a crossout on it, deal with their prosperity, and then you can save your ash for something else they might want to be trying to use. Plus, as well, if you use crossout instead of ash, you can't be talenced in return, which is quite beneficial. Then, of course, we've got the one Call by the Grey, so obviously these are your hand trap preventers, I suppose, in a way. And then, of course, you've got your 2 talents. I've gone with triple droplet and 2 prosperity. And again, the idea behind this is you've got consistency. You've got not so much a negate for hand traps, but you kind of punish your opponent if they do hand trap you. Because if they go 1 hand trap and you've got enough to continue to play, you activate talents, you look at their hand, you take away what might either continue to interrupt you or what they might be needing to start their board up. And then droplet is just incredibly powerful, that if they do turn your board off, you've got droplet that can help you break their board in retaliation, but you also have the ability to set it as well. You can consider something like Super Poly, as there are a bit of flex spots in the extra deck, but I feel you're going to get more benefit from a droplet being a bit more consistent and a bit more varied for all of the matchups you might face, rather than specifically for Super Poly. But again, if you are going to a locals environment which is pretty much the same deck over and over and over again, then you'll adapt the hand trap lineup, you'll adapt the board breaking lineup to stuff that is very specific to those particular matches. Moving on to the extra deck, of course, your main Mac Daddy boss monster is, of course, your Scareclaw Tryhard. Now, because of this card, it did make me feel a little bit better about not relying on access code talker, which is why it's not going to be in the extra deck, but that's something that you can swap out something like an SP Little Knight for if you wanted to. The way I saw it is the big benefit that access code would give you is that ability for non-target destruction to clear off back row or front row, but when you have the ability of making Tryhard, which can be slightly semi-protected, as well as being able to just shift everything to defense, this can pretty much do the job for you. We're only playing 2 different attributes of link monsters in the form of Earth and Dark, so even then your access code's only going to get 2 pops, which can still be very useful, but this should be able to win you the game outright, as you should need to. So this one is 3 effect monsters and it must be link summoned. All face-up monsters on the field are changed to defense, and it's unaffected by the activated effects of defense position monsters. Once per turn, if this card is in the extra monster zone, you get to target a level 3 Scareclaw monster in your graveyard, special summon it, and if you do, you add a Scareclaw monster from the deck to the hand. Also, you cannot special summon monsters for the rest of the turn except Scareclaws, so which is absolutely fine, because this will be like one of the last cards, or one of the last plays you make, unless you need to circle this back around, because it's not a hard once per turn to revive and to search, and that's just going to be able to give you access to another Scareclaw if you're trying to rotate round your Belongs, your Astras, and your Acros. I've got 2 Lightheart. Now, against my better judgment, I cut this down to 2. And the reason I say against my better judgment is every time I've cut it to 2, I've always gone into a grind game where I really need the 3rd. However, I've tried to be a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more pace with this deck as well, which is why I sacrificed these one of the Lighthearts for an IP Masquerena, so that I could IP into something like an SP, but also go into an Underworld Goddess. And the reason I'm showing you these here is because these are the 2 options that the IP can go to. And I kind of did this one to deal with any of my opponents that were setting up immovable towers, which would cause me massive issues. And then obviously SP Little Knight is SP Little Knight. Again, if you're trying to keep this on a tighter budget, you can cut out the SP Little Knight, go for something like a Nightmare Unicorn, Access Code, or an Appaloosa if you want to. We've then got the 1 Link Spider, and then this is to allow you to continue to play through Nibiru, because if they give you a token, obviously it's a non-effect monster, and you need to turn it into an effect monster in order to get into your Tryhard. It also gives you the ability that you can turn this into that, and then your Scareclaws can actually summon to a zone a link monster points to, which is exactly what Spider will do for you. So if you've still got your extenders and they've nibbed you early, you can still continue to extend, you can still continue to link up and get everywhere you need to go. The one cross sheet, and obviously the idea behind the cross sheet is that you can summon out your Visas Astrolaud to a zone that cross sheet points to, and then it can revive a Scareclaw or anything else you need to. And at the base minimum, you've got a 1, you'll be the card that you bring back, and you've got your Astrolaud. The 3 of those can go together in order to get you into your Tri-Heart. Now, obviously, in the scenario that you're pushing for an OTK, you want to leave the Astrolaud on the board, and that's where an additional extender can come into play, as long as cross sheet has a zone free to do so. We've then got the one Asura, and the reason we've got with this one is because all of our main deck Scareclaws, apart from right card, are of course Earth monsters. You can go for the Dark Charmer in its place, which will probably be a little bit more consistent to the environment that you are going to, but it's just something that I wanted to mention and keep an eye on, because you can also bring back your opponent's Fenrir, which is quite funny when you bring back your opponent's Fenrir and then search out your own Scareclaw. That can be quite entertaining. And the last 2 we've got is the Typhon, because obviously being able to just slap a Typhon after you've been able to play through a lot of your opponent's interactions can be very damaging. Again, if you don't have access to this, because it is a bit more of a costly card, that's where of course Access and Appaloosa come into play. And the last one that we've got in the replacement for the Baron right now is the Chenying, and the reason that we've gone with this one is just because it's an incredibly powerful boss monster, not to mention that you can actually trigger its own effect by banishing with the Visas Astrolaud, trigger this to then non-target banish one from the grave and the field, and this can become a bit of a fat stack boss monster, because every time you're going to be banishing your cards off of the back of the Visas Astrolaud to fusion summon or anything else, you're just going to make this stronger and stronger and make your opponent's monsters weaker and weaker. Yes, of course it does get shifted to defense when you do put the Tri-Heart on the board, but even then it still weakens your opponent's monsters and still buffs yours, so you can just go Tri-Heart and go 1-1-1 and pretty much kill out the game from that point on. So that's it for the entire Scareclaw build. It is a very, very fun deck and relatively budget if you do take out of consideration stuff like this and wherever it is. I've just gone past it probably 3 or 4 times. This one. And if you do take these out of circulation, it's not the end of the world, because Unicorn is still very good. These are just like the meta cards, or more so SP Little Knight than the Typhoon, but these are like the meta cards that pretty much help you grind everything out. Being able to end your board with an SP Little Knight and then a Tri-Heart just gives you that ability for another form of interruption if your opponent is trying to disrupt your Tri-Heart plays. But again, you can shift this deck to being a go first or a go second, which is what makes it really kind of cool, is it doesn't really give your opponent an option of, okay, well, if I make it go second, it's going to be massively weaker, or if I make it go first, it's going to be massively weaker. I would say that its strength does lie in going second, but even then, being able to set up a Tri-Heart against your opponent's Tempeyes can be very damaging, because then obviously everything gets shifted to defense. It's unaffected by the activated effects of monsters in defense, and it also gives you more protection when you've got a rival, so it's not just Black Rose, nuke the board, Kaiman, game kind of thing. So that's it for the entire profile. If you do have any questions, by all means, please put in the comments down below. I will be more than happy to answer them for you. For now, as absolutely always, stay safe, and of course, happy dueling.